Steve, welcome to Direct Relief. It's our pleasure to welcome you here again. I hope that all of you as audience members find some joy and inspiration from Steve's talks today. Please.
Well, thank you. And I am hoping that a spirit of amnesia will fall upon all of you who heard me talk about this, what was it, 6 years ago now? Because I hope that this is fresh and new, and that we're able to reach you as individuals and to encourage you about your part in this big thing that's going on to help this group of people that, sorry, a little bit closer to the mic. Check, check. Okay. So we got some ground to cover, and I want to just give you the outline of what we're going to talk about. And first of all, to keep in mind that it's International Women's Day, and this is just a prime example of a women's issue that is so important and has been really impacted by the effort of a lot of people, and especially by the work of Direct Relief. And so we keep that in mind today, realizing that the day is about something far broader than even fistula. I want to broaden people's perspective about the kind of cosmic things that are really happening as I talk to you, as I share the lives of these women, and then as you go back there and do your kidding work, that you're getting yourself into something that's way bigger than you are, and it's who knows where that all ends, where the ripples from your activities today and just the fact that you've come here today, where that can end up. And I'm going to give you some maybe wild examples of that. And so I hope that that makes all of this worth your time that you've taken out of your otherwise busy schedule. But I know I don't need to say that to this group, that you already get that, and that's why you're here. So this is why this is a great group to talk to and a great organization to work with. And then finally, I want to talk a little bit about, you know, when we think about why do we do what we do, it's who is it all for? And I want to encourage all of you that a good chunk of it we do for ourselves, because we derive tremendous benefit when we do good things for other people. And we want to talk about how that works a little bit and use fistula as an example. So that's all we need to cover today. And if it gets beyond 2 hours, please raise your hand and I'll try to think of something to say. So first of all, I'm never told to say anything like this, but in my 562 years in this field, I've worked with about 10 billion NGOs, and number one by far is Direct Relief. And all of the things that Paulina just said about giving them input as they design programs, the really mind-blowing thing is that they've listened to what I've said and they've turned that into policy and procedure. And then we've had a chance to be honest with each other about how things are going and to redirect and to try to make things better and better and better and better for the people that we serve. And I can tell you that that's a nightmare in other organizations, but it's just the DNA here at Direct Relief. And so I want to give a big shout out, even realizing that Thomas and Damon aren't here, but that this is a terrific organization that we can all be proud of having a part in. So, hot dog. So, for those of you who don't know, we got to begin with what the heck is this fistula word that I may not have ever heard before. And there are reasons why you haven't heard it, because this is a condition that rarely happens here in the United States. And I know I made it all the way through urology residency and only saw it in a textbook once and never heard anybody talk about it. And next thing I knew, I was up to my nostrils in it in northern Nigeria. But so anyway, let me just give you the standard scenario composite of the stories of thousands of women that I've known and met over the years. And so let's say that this is a woman in rural Guinea-Bissau, and that's actually a country if you didn't know that. let's say she's in a polygamous home that her husband has 4 wives, including her, that she's the youngest. And because times are hard, he had trouble paying bride prices with each subsequent wife and had to settle for less and less quality. And so he married her when she was 13 because that was a bigger bargain and he could pay less to her family for that. So then as a 13-year-old, she's a fully qualified wife, and often these girls end up pregnant before they ever even have a period that they know about, because the first time they ovulate, they become pregnant. Their bodies are a long way away from reaching adult size, and so there's an issue with what we call obstructed labor, and that's that the baby comes down, tries to come out, and the pelvis just isn't big enough to go through. And the uterus is diligent to do its thing to try to push the baby on out and never stops trying. And the whole time, the baby's head is smashed against all the pelvic organs and shutting off the flow of blood to everything. And it doesn't tear or anything like that. It dies for lack of blood flow and falls out. And so they lose the bottom of their bladder, they lose the front of the rectum, they lose sometimes the entire vagina, part of this uterus. I think I went a year doing like 15 pelvic exams a day and never saw a cervix because the cervix was always just completely destroyed and gone. And so it just does utter mayhem to everything down in the pelvis. And as a result, they end up, usually the most common symptom is the complete, total 24/7 for the rest of their lives leakage of urine, because as soon as the kidneys produce it, there's no longer a storage organ down there. There's just a big gap where that used to be and falls out. About 15% also have that in the rectum, and they have feces coming out 24/7. And remember, she's 13 and none of this is fatal. So she has maybe 50, 60 years of this to look forward to as her lifestyle. Then Africa is a completely social culture, and this is a completely isolating condition. Nobody wants to be around somebody who smells this bad because they're like little walking outhouses and they know it and they're ashamed. In some of the traditional spiritual values in these regions, the thought generically, whether they're Christian, Muslim, traditional, whatever, that God isn't that bad of a guy and he would never do something like this to a person unless they had done something really horrible to deserve it. And so at the end of the day, she never got to decide when she married, who she married, when they began having relations, when to have a child, whether or not to go to the hospital when she was in obstructed labor. And now she gets this horrible condition. She gets blamed for it and cast out just like a leper in in the Bible. And so this still exists to this day in 2023. And we have made progress, and there are fewer new cases, but this is still a real life scenario for many, many people. And they can go for years without care, not knowing where to get a repair done. And my personal record is 46 years between the delivery and the 15-minute operation I did to fix her. She lost 46 years for lack of that 15 minutes. And a colleague of mine in Kenya in 1 week saw a lady 62 years and another 63 years with their fistula before they were fixed. And so this is the thing that we've battled against now for my 36 years in this field. And that's the classic story. Well, one thing that's changed a lot since the last time I was here is that we got another story developing at the same time. And this is something called iatrogenic fistula. And iatrogenic is a word that means basically caused by your doctor. And so there's a lot of pelvic surgery going on in the developing world by people who are poorly trained or poorly equipped or maybe not very honest or whatever, and bad outcomes are happening. And one of them is that it's possible to make a hole in the bladder or other organs down there and cause this same similar scenario not from a long labor, but from a bad hysterectomy. Hysterectomy is far and away the number one cause, but it can be from cesarean section as well. So I saw two in one morning in Bangladesh a few years ago. I talked to two women. First one had a little bit of pelvic pain, was immediately booked for hysterectomy, showed up for her surgery. Things were busy, so her surgery ended up being done by the clinic administrator because the surgeon was busy. And she ended up with a big hole in her bladder from somebody who was with no training whatsoever, just doing that. The other lady, same thing, some vague complaints, booked for a hysterectomy, got a call, we're running a little bit late, and the surgeon came to her house in the evening, put her on her dining room table and did her hysterectomy on her own dining room table and gave her a big hole in the bladder from that. These are the kind of things that are going on now. And in some countries, 85, 90, even 100% of new fistulas are because of this iatrogenic cause and no longer because of the obstructed labor thing. So the repair is pretty similar. You got a hole in the bladder, you got to deal with it. But imagine the difference in prevention. To prevent an obstetric fistula, we have to make sure that every woman on earth can get an emergency cesarean section if she needs it. And if she doesn't, this is going to happen. And so we've made a lot of progress in some countries in this area. But for iatrogenic fistula, we need women everywhere to have access to safe surgery for normal conditions that people all over the world get. And for there to be consequences if somebody other than a trained surgeon decides to have an intervention, let's call it. And I always say that that's, you know, cultural change is difficult, but a few executions, you know, we'll start turning it right around, because it makes you so angry to see how these women are just being butchered for profit. And so this is the new challenge now, is this iatrogenic thing. So I hope you're encouraged by all of that. And so this leakage of urine and all of that, I've already touched upon that. It seems cruelly focused on subtracting most of the things that women would use to assign themselves value. They can no longer have sex with their husbands, and that's what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to make lots and lots of babies. A lot of them can never get pregnant again. They're supposed to do most of the work, like carrying water and farm work. This woman's got foot drop because the nerves to her legs were damaged by the same pressure that killed all of her other pelvic organs. And then this is also after standing and talking to her for about half a minute, and you can see the puddle that she's leaving on the floor just from that period of time. And this is a permanent forever and ever scenario for her. So we got to give them their lives back. So I always take time, because fistula has such a wild history. I'm going to go through quickly. I don't want to bore you, but if you go to the Cairo Museum and visit Hennet, the wife of Mentuhotep II, who was 4,500 BC, her mummy is there. You can say hello to her, and she's got a big old fistula. And so she was the first lady of Egypt, and she got this condition. Her exalted status didn't protect her from going down this same pathway. So we got what's 4,600 plus 2023? Almost 7,000 year history documented for this condition. So then fast forward to the late 1800s, and you've got this dude here who's a doctor in South Carolina named J. Marion Sims. He's known as the father of modern gynecology. And I don't think they give medals to surgeons anymore. I wish they did. So he's sporting all of his medals because he was the first one to figure out how to fix fistulas. And that's where American gynecology was born. He got his wife to, he stole one of her serving spoons out of the dining room and had it bent to use as a retractor. And he used platinum wire because there was no such thing as permanent suture and all these wild things. And he kind of eventually got it worked out. And because of that, he ended up with a statue in Central Park, which is not bad for a country doctor from South Carolina. And we're going to talk more about him later. So if you've heard from him about him, don't get upset yet. Okay, we can get upset later. Then he built a little tiny hospital in New York where he was living, and that rapidly outgrew that and put this thing up here called the Women's Hospital, which was strictly a fistula hospital. So the first fistula hospital was not in Ouagadougou, it was in New York City, believe it or not. And then in the late 1800s, we developed safe anesthesia, sterile technique, and so that you could actually survive an operation. And so cesarean sections started being done. Transportation was improved so women could get to help. And it disappeared from the US just by offering cesarean section. It's so rare that once when I was in practice in New Mexico, I was clandestinely flown to Harvard because they had a lady with a fistula at Harvard and they had no idea what to do and they had tried twice and failed. And I did it in about 10 minutes and left and went back to New Mexico again. But it does not exist here anymore. And so, so this place no longer had a use, and they decided to tear it down and sold it and put this building up on its site. And so the Waldorf Astoria is the site of the first fistula hospital in the world. So next time you're in New York, keep that in mind. Okay. So things are changing, and it's an exciting time to be involved in all of this, and it's especially exciting to be in a position to apply some perspective. You know, as 36 years into this, I have official big time old fart status, and so I got asked to be the author, the lead author of this UN WHO document on what we ought to be doing, and we need to recognize that the old story isn't the main story anymore. We've got to do something about this iatrogenic fistula. We need to train surgeons that really are well-versed in advanced pelvic reconstructive surgery, not just take, you know, dermatologists. I know of a dermatologist that was trained as a fistula surgeon. I mean, so all of these changes are starting to happen, and that's just an incredible thing to see, and it's a humbling thing to think that you've had something to do with. Society is changing too. So here's a great story. So you remember the whole story about J. Marion Sims working out how to do fistulas and getting his medals and all of that. The way he worked it out was on his own slaves. And the first one that was successful was after 45 attempts without anesthesia. And the second one was 29 attempts. And there's a big argument, well, they wanted it, you know, and they were willing to have the surgery, even though they weren't given anesthesia, blah, blah. I'm not going to get in the middle of that. It's a mess. But so the big change is that's no longer okay. And so on International Women's Day, we can say that things are changing. So these are protesters in front of his statue there. And the end result was there he goes off to a warehouse in New Jersey. So he's gone now So as opposed to in the past, we can say now, don't mess with women's issues, you know, and today is a great example of that. And so we'll let poor J. Marion spin in his grave over this one. So, so what has DR Direct Relief been doing about this? Well, for 10 years now, we've been doing these modules, and these are just great big pallets full of all the suture and catheters and a lot of the medications and things that are special to fistula repair that we can give to hospitals out there so that they can take this on as part of their clinical work. And this, you can see the big smile there. They're really happy to get this stuff because they get the best of the best to do the best job that they can for these important women. The other thing is that Direct Relief has an important presence in the international community of fistula providers now with this, it's called a Global Fistula Hub. It's an extensive website with a lot of mapping capabilities where you can figure out where anything is going on anywhere in the world. There's journal articles, there's counts of cases by countries, and blah, 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 blah. And this is becoming a really important networking tool, and it's all about networking and community these days. So a lot of this is really, really dark stuff. Imagine a darker story than that scenario that I told you about the woman in Guinea-Bissau. But in some ways, it's also really cool because this is like the cleanest issue I can imagine in terms of ethics and all of that, that who could be against trying to help these women? Nobody in their right mind could be against trying to help the poorest of the poor, the most disenfranchised, disempowered people on earth. And so if you want to support something without any doubts about where this is going to go, here you go. And I, for 36 years, have been able to get up in the morning knowing that I was going to be involved in something that was cleanly worthwhile and really purely humanitarian in its nature. So, and then as I said too, it's really important to be involved at times when things are changing so much, and direct relief has been positively involved in so many of these areas of change. So once again, wish Thomas was here to hear this. Okay, so I've thought a lot recently about how do you, it seems like the world's coming apart. I hate to see direct relief emails in my inbox in the morning because it means there's, earthquake in Turkey, war in Ukraine, okay, Syria, and, okay, and just one disaster after another, after another, after another. And you see all the divisiveness in our own country, and you see so many people hating each other, and you see blah, 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 and everything is dark, 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 unsolvable problems, climate change, everything. And so how do you survive that and have a life that's worthwhile, and I had no idea that Einstein had actually said this. So he said, there are only two ways to live your life. One is as if nothing is a miracle. The other is as though everything is a miracle. And certainly you can live your life by door number one, but it's a pretty discouraging, dark way to go about it. But number two, to look for the positive, to see the miracles that are going on, that's what has allowed me to survive through all of these years of being involved in these awful stories of suffering. So here's my miracle for today. This is my 7th grandchild, Artie. He might need ear tubes next week, but I'm sure he'll make it through that. And this is a miracle. He was a high-tech baby, and we're just glad that he's around. So in this, what we're talking about today, the miracles are the women themselves. These are not, I worked at the Hamlin Hospital, which is the really famous one in Ethiopia, and Catherine Hamlin, who at one point was up for the Nobel Peace Prize, she used to always talk about my little girls, and there's a way that's endearing, but they're not little girls, they're complex human beings, and they've been done wrong by the world. And so I see them as powerful individuals because so many of them not only cope, they thrive even in the face of all of this. And I want some of that, I need some of that in my life. And so they also have full-sized human rights, even though they're tiny little things usually as a risk factor for their obstructed labor. These are some powerful, potent individuals that I stand in awe of. And so we need to do what we can in organizations like Direct Relief to make sure that we're always serving and protecting them, protecting their rights, not exploiting them and all of that. And I told the pharmacy staff here, don't mess with them because they made my life better, and you're going to have to answer to me, So these are incredible people. Okay. So just a couple stories to illustrate that, and I hope you're not offended by this, but this is real life stuff. And since the last time I was here, I've heard that Chris in this picture has died of malaria, and which makes me really sad. But so Chris lived in rural Liberia at the time of the Civil War there, and one night woke up to the sound of gunfire, and there were soldiers killing everybody in her village because of their ethnic group. So she took off out the back into the woods and ran for her life with a friend while they could hear some of the guys actively tracking her and trying to run her down and kill her. And she ran and ran until she couldn't run anymore. And She couldn't run anymore because she'd been in labor for 3 days, and the head of her dead baby had delivered out between her legs. And so she laid down and pushed out this dead fetus and had to then pop right back up and start running again because the guys were still after her. She finally collapsed in the morning from blood loss, and a friend put her in a wheelbarrow because no public transport would take her because they said she smelled like dead fish. And their friend pushed her from Liberia to a refugee camp in Ghana. And but you would expect somebody who's been through something like that to just be a zombie. But she was incredibly sarcastic, had a great sense of humor, and ended up on the crew of Mercy ship's big hospital ship, the Africa Mercy, and really an eloquent spokesperson for this whole condition. And so something about her inside kept this thing from touching her essence, and she toughed her way through it. And I would not have wanted to make her mad because I know she could have taken me in 2 rounds, And so, and then I got this. I don't know if you can read it or not. She sent me this note. Thank you, Dr. Steve, for your good work. God bless you and give you more knowledge. And that makes up for a lot of dark days, getting things like that. So this ship had a knitting class for the ladies one time, and I ended up with this, and this is one of my prized possessions because I got a knitted beret from the ladies. And then this is another great one. This is in Liberia. This boy's grandmother I operated on 6 times, and she kept having issues, and she said, this time I can feel it's going to be a success. She said, I'm getting old, but my daughter, she's about to deliver, and I'm telling you, if she has a boy, I am naming him for you. So this kid's name is Dr. Steve. His first name is Doctor, so he's probably an accountant by now or something. But I mean, where else, what kind of work would you get that kind of a privilege? To Dr. Steve. So my point number 1 is that it came to me that in this time of thinking about COVID and immunizations and all of that, that these kind of stories of overcoming this darkness that's out there is the way that we immunize ourselves against despair. And despair is a devastating disease, and it can destroy our lives. And so today, you being here and going back there to pack these kits, you're giving yourself a little shot so that despair can't touch you today. To despair, And this picture is, what do you do for a picture of immunization? I don't know. So I went in January and for a doctor's appointment in Chicago. And if you could zoom in a little bit, you would see the SARS-CoV-2 jumping from my doctor onto me because I caught COVID from him when he gave me this hug. Even though I had been immunized 5 times and had COVID before. So immunizations are important because I didn't get sick. But being involved in good works like this immunizes us against getting totally worn out by all the darkness. We can laugh at it, just like Chris might. I found this incredible quote last week. I'd never seen it before, but I really believe that this is true. It says, no despair of ours can alter the reality of things, nor stain the joy of the cosmic dance, which is always there. And so part of what we need to do today, especially, is to think about this cosmic dance going on. We're going to be boogieing down as we get our hands dirty doing this work today. And it's work to be able to visualize that this is going on. It's reality, even though we can't perceive it. doesn't happen unless you try to make it happen. But it's true that there are things going on up here, and that's the rest of what I want to talk to you about here. So take home message number 2 is, well, first of all, what in the world is my wife is recently passed head of the campaign to end fistula UNFPA, and now she's maternal child health expert for UNHCR, the High Commission for Refugees, and she's stationed to Geneva. So she's doing a hybrid Vermont and Geneva work situation, and this is CERN in Geneva, where they found the Higgs boson. I'm sure you were all expecting to hear about Higgs bosons today. So I'm a geek, I admit it. And so I've been trying to relate to what a Higgs boson is and all of that. And there's all of these things in quantum mechanics that are just too weird for anybody to even say out loud. But one of them is that subatomic particles here can influence a subatomic particle, not here, but on the other end of the universe. And somehow they've demonstrated that with experiments, I guess. I mean, but what a mind blower that things are so interconnected, and that this particle over here has no clue where it's having an influence at the other end of the universe, but it's really, really happening, even though it makes no sense. Bizarro stuff. Anyway, so that I want to go there. It's been closed because of COVID, but it's right maybe 20 minutes from my wife's apartment. So you have no idea what kind of interaction that the act of kindness that you do today, where that could end, where that's going to go, who it's going to influence, and you can't see the end at the beginning. But it's good to keep looking back so that you can say, wow, I had no clue. So just in programmatic terms, since we're in an NGO here, I mean, anything that we do for obstetric fistula accidentally spills over and makes things better for maternal health in general. And sorry, but anything that you do for maternal health in general helps with human rights, public health in general, not only for women, but for men too. It's called positive collateral damage, and these things all make the world a better place. So these are all the things that we accidentally do when we focus on this one small focused issue. So anyway, so 1991, holy crap, that was a long time ago. And I'm in the picture. I'm the guy in the middle, by the way. I don't know if you can tell or not. I went to Nigeria to be a doctor at a mission hospital, and all of these, I started seeing women with this fistula thing and fixed a few, and none of them could pay. You had to pay at our place, even though it was tiny, but none of them could pay. And so I wrote home and I just said, oops, sorry. I said, wow, there's this really cool thing going on here, and all these women need is a little financial help, and could you help out? And so our friends started sending us money, and we always had enough to do one more operation, not any more, just one more, but we never turned anybody away. So I thought this is a big deal because I've got 11 ladies in this picture, the rest are staff. And from this time, right about this time of year, we started this tradition of inviting all the ladies back if they could come to have a big effing party. And they come and just party down for like a week. and this was the first party, these 11 ladies here. And so I kept looking for ways to, improve the fundraising and to get space in the ward. And the next year, this is the party here. And then I remember this one happened in the middle of a petrol strike in Nigeria, and there were no cars on the road. And all these ladies found their way there from, sometimes hundreds of miles away. How did they do that? I don't know. So a few years ago, this was the time of the 25th party. And I'm going to go through this because this is what I mean about you never know where this is going to go. So the guy standing next to me is Jonathan Kashima. And Jonathan started out as the gardener for a missionary on the hospital compound. And they said, you know what, you're too bright to just be a gardener, and they sent him to a 6-week course and he became a community health worker, and he blew the socks off of all of that. So he got sponsored to med school. So then he did OBGYN, and every year he took all of his vacation time and came across town and worked with me to learn how to do fistulas. And so then I got offered a position in Ethiopia, and after 3 years I left and he took over the program for me. And then he became medical director of the hospital where he started out as gardener to one of the missionary doctors. Then he protected it all through the 2008 crisis, the finances, where the hospital almost closed. And if anything was going to happen, the fistula program was going to keep going. He did that. And so somewhere along in there, Carolyn Kirshner showed up. She's a GYN oncologist from Chicago who was interested and committed. And so she learned fistula from Jonathan and ran the program for 9 years. And I just stayed with them while I was catching COVID from my doctor there. So, and then about the same time, this other guy, Sunday Langman, showed up, and he was in residency there and finished his residency and was mentored along as a surgeon between Jonathan and Carolyn. And 2 weeks ago, I ran a webinar for surgeons on specifically the most difficult of the difficult cases in fistula repair. The ones we call it deemed incurable, which means maybe incurable for you, but not for me. And so we tried to get the best of the best in the world to be on our speaker panel. And the one to speak about the most difficult of them all was Sunday, because he's published all these papers and has the world's greatest experience in diversion procedures and everything. Then along came Steve Shepard from West Michigan, and he did hundreds and hundreds of repairs during his time there. And so when they sent me this picture, they said that the place had now done 25,000 repairs. So here I go. When we started out, I was only thinking about doing one more. I'll get over it. And this is only one of the places where I've worked. Who knows what's happened at other places, And so this gets you out of bed in the morning. This is a huge immunization against despair. And I most days get to say to despair because I keep this picture where I can see it. And so you get to tap into a part of that today. And the DR staff, I tried to tell the pharmacy staff over and over again, every single one of you is an indispensable part in a chain that leads to these women getting what they need. And I get to be on the front end, so I get to hang out with the ladies and have them try to braid my short hair and all of that kind of stuff. But they work without those positive strokes, which is almost even more admirable because they don't get to stand up front and all of that. But what they're doing is just as important. So this is big time crap here. Okay, you have no idea where the end of your good intentions are going to go. And if you think about making a dignity kit for a woman maybe in Ukraine today, what's that going to do for you? Well, who knows? Maybe today she was so down that she thought about ending it all, and getting a gift like that kept her going, and then she ends up curing cancer or something like that. You have no clue where the positive effects and the ripples of these positive acts happen. And so this is powerful, powerful stuff. So another example of not knowing the benefits that could come back on me would go something like this. I always think about fistula is very, very difficult, complicated surgery, but it's low tech. And it's a good thing because we have no access to tech in any of these places. Like getting a urine culture in most hospitals is not going to happen because that's too much, you know. But here in the States, we have these terrific tools. Like, look at how clear this scan is. And this is called a 68 gallium dotatate CT PET scan. And so this patient has received a drug that only sticks to one kind of cancer cell called neuroendocrine carcinoma, which is what Steve Jobs died of. And so all of you can tell wherever this is, the bright spot is, boom, you know, no doubt about what's going on there. And that happens to be the second vertebral body, first vertebrae, right here. And then likewise, this is that same person's MRI, and we have dye now that just makes things lights up. And all of these white spots over here on the left are cancer too. And this, I think this is fabulous and it's great. And I hate it because it's me. These are my pictures. And so the cool thing is here I am on top of my game as a surgeon, you know, and you know, well-renowned and all of that. And then I end up with this thing that takes away a lot of my ability to travel and maybe isolates me because people don't, you know, once they hear you have cancer, they have good intentions, but they don't know what to say. So they kind of, you know, and you get isolated and you think about, you know, well, today's probably going to be a little bit worse than yesterday and a little bit worse tomorrow. And there's no way that this is ever going to go away. You know, this is not curable or anything like that. And so who do you go to learn how to cope with something like that in your life? Even if you have lifespan left, you know, you could sit around just feeling sorry for yourself all the time, not doing anything or whatever, but who do you look to as your mentors? So this is my support group. These ladies, they know about every part of what I just said. They're isolated, they're limited, and like I said, you go to a place where fistula women are, the worst of them, who have had surgery 10 times, they are partying down over in a corner somewhere and just having a great time because they've hooked into some kind of cosmic thing. And so I hate it when people say, well, isn't it great that you've given up your life as a rich urologist in the United States to go sacrifice and go give yourself for these black women, you know, that don't know nothing, you know, and I think, oh, you know, they have no clue what they're saying because I've taken away so much more than I've given. And that's, once again, what there's no limit to this. You can tap into these kind of things too, as you maybe give money to direct relief. You don't know where that's going to go, how it could benefit you, but I believe that it is going to benefit you some way that you just can't imagine. You can spend time getting out kits, and like I said, maybe some lady in Turkey that has no home because of the earthquake there is going to be just terrifically encouraged by that, change her life, and she changes the world somehow. And you can own that in some way without even knowing specifically what's happened. There's this cosmic dance going on. So I think I'm going to make it now. So thank you. So today is for you. And I hope that you can accept that without feeling guilty about that. We have this thing in our culture especially like for missionaries. We used to say misery is next to godliness, and it's not true. Stuff is a blast, You can scoff at despair today. You can moon despair, if you want to, because you're involved on the other side of this equation. You can bask in being an overcomer of suffering instead of, and even if you're suffering it yourself, you can party down and dance in this cosmic dance that is for real going on everywhere. And you can kick some butt maybe today on the behalf of women, just like the statue ladies did to poor Marion Sims as he rots away in New Jersey now. So, and then you can not be afraid or embarrassed to receive these good things that come back to you, because it's come from somewhere beyond you. You had nothing to do with it. But if it happens, then wow, this is what it's all about. So this is my favorite quote. And I know I showed this last time, but Helen Keller had encephalitis when she was like 2 and ended up blind and deaf, and ended up being this incredible intellectual and spokesperson for the handicapped and for women. She was a women's rights advocate as a blind and deaf person, and this is what she said, that although the world is full of suffering, and I can attest to you that it is, that it's also full of the overcoming of it. And that's going on here. This is a headquarters for overcoming. And so I hope that you can appreciate that, and that you can receive that yourself as motivation for doing the right thing and not being afraid to help people. That's all it takes. So thank you.